So welcome to the dev environment. I am Charlie, I'm your host. Today we're just gonna do a React coding challenge that I found on YouTube actually by another YouTuber. And I thought it was really interesting. And I just wanted to tackle it myself just cause like it wasn't done in TypeScript. And I found myself thinking I would do this in a bit different of a way. And so I just thought, oh, this is like a really great opportunity for me to kind of do a little coding tutorial. This is about like an intermediate dev level question. And so let's get into it. So it's a coding challenge. So we're going to create a React application that allows users to click the screen and leave a dot on it. The dot's going to be a 10 by 10 pixel dot. And then afterwards, we're going to create an undo button that allows the users to remove the last dot. And it can be clicked as many times as needed to remove all the dots. And then we're going to create a redo button that puts the dot back on the screen. It can be clicked as many times as it wants until all the dots are redisplayed on the screen. Even then, when you click it, it should still be clickable. So let's get into it. So here I just have like a really basic Vite and React app. I'm going to do what everyone ends up doing anyways and just delete basically everything inside of there. And then I'm going to go to the CSS styling and I'm just going to get rid of all of this as well. So there's just two things really fast. We have a div of class name of app. So I'll get rid of the React logo here. So first thing I'm going to need to do is we're going to need to keep our dots somewhere. So we're going to use a useState object, and I'm just going to call it dots and set dots. And it's actually just going to be an empty array. Now, I want to define what my dots are. So I'm just going to do a quick interface of dots. And I'm going to make it have an X, which is going to be a number, and I'm going to make it have a Y, which is also going to be a number. And so this state object is going to be an array of dots, but right now it's just empty. And so here on our app, I'm actually just going to open this to the side, split right, and keep our README, I guess, if we want. So the first thing I want to make sure is that our DOM is displaying properly. So our body looks good. Our div of root is not full size, which we want to fix. So here, I'm actually just going to get rid of this, and I'm just going to go width of 100 view width, just to lock it into that, and then a height of 100 view height. And then I'm also going to, I'll just leave it as that. And then, so we have our, inside of our root, we have our app. So let me just save this really fast and let's just look at our root. So it's good. And then we have our app component, and that is a class name of app. And so I'm going to give it a height of 100% and a width of 100% just to keep it there. And I'm also just going to make it display flex just because as we develop things, I'm going to want to do it as that, and I'm going to give it a flex direction of column, and I'll explain why in a second. But so here we have our app, and then so if we remember in our README, we have two buttons, and so I'm just going to put the buttons at the top. You could really put them anywhere, but I'm just going to put them at the top and kind of wrap them in a div just so that that area is not clickable, because I don't want to be able to click on top of the buttons and draw a dot. I just want that to be its own little space. So I'm going to make a div with a ID, just because there's only going to be one of them, of button wrapper. And then inside of this, I'm just going to do two buttons. And I'll make this one undo, and I'll make this one redo. So we just have both of those. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a second div, and this one's going to have an ID of click area. Call it whatever you want. Doesn't really matter. So first thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do the button wrapper. And I'm going to make it have a width of 100%. Oops. And am I going to do anything else with it? Not really. I'm going to set it to display flex, and I just want to like align my buttons center. So I'm just going to do align item center and justify content center. Then we'll just save that, and there we go. We have our buttons kind of up at the top here, and if we look, we have the button wrapper all the way there. And then here we have this click area as well. And so the click area, I just wanted to take up all the other space in the page. So I'm just gonna set it to a flex of 1 so it just grows as big as it needs to grow. And obviously we're gonna make it display flex. I think that should be good. So here the click area takes up pretty much all the space on the div, on the DOM, and then the button wrapper just takes up the top there. So we can see that we basically now have a DOM where the click area is all of this, and then the button wrapper just is up here. You could do a bunch of different things. You could like wrap the button wrapper like just around the buttons and like leave this space as clickable as well. Doesn't really matter, however you want to do it. This is just the way I'm going to do it. I'm also going to do one thing though, because it's not really clear where the click area is. So I'm actually going to do a border top of 1 pix solid. And we can make it hot pink. Why not? Just to give us some styling here. It doesn't really matter in a coding interview how things look 99% of the time when I'm interviewing devs. I'm not looking for like it to be the flashiest thing ever. I just want to see that you're able to build this functionality in a meaningful way. And we might do another coding test later on or something that's more focused on styling. But I find it's especially in these kind of things, what I'm looking for is your ability to build out this app in a meaningful way. So now we have this click area. So we need to do like a draw method. So I'm going to go const draw. And so this is going to be our method that's going to put the dot onto the DOM. And then so actually in the click area, I'm just going to have an on-click handler and I'm just going to make it do draw. So now when you have an on-click function, it's going to pass an event into the DOM. Now in TypeScript, it's even more specific. If you're a junior or even an intermediate, it's probably okay not to have this, but it's a mouse event. If you're ever curious of what type it is, it's because we're doing a click. If it's like a keyboard, it could be a keyboard event. There's all kinds of different events. React treats any click handler as a mouse event. And then so with our E, now in caps locks, console.log, and I'm just gonna log out the E because I actually wanna see what I'm getting. So when I click on the DOM, I get this synthetic click event here. And it looks like we have like a client X and a client Y. And so if I click, kind of somewhere a little bit more meaningful, I just want to see that, yeah, so we're about like 41. And so if I just inspect the height of these buttons here, it's about 40. So actually, yeah, so that's where we want. That's the sweet spot right there. So we have a client X and a client Y. So we're going to want to use those. So there's a bunch of ways that you can extract these. We could just destructure. So you can go client X, client Y equals E. And then so, because we're getting those both from there. And then, but see on my interface, I called them X and Y. I could call it left and top. I could do it a lot of different ways. I just find X and Y is the easiest kind of to read and everything. So that means that when we're setting our state with the set dots here, we're going to want to make sure that we do it that way. So I'm going to call the set dots. And so what we want to do is, first thing we want to do is we want to pass in any existing dots, because if it's the first dot, there's going to be no existing dots. So it's just going to pass in an empty array and it'll be okay. But if there's 1 or 2 dots, we want to make sure that we persist those as well in our state. So we're going to pass in the dots, and then I'm going to do a new object, and it's going to be X, and it's going to be assigned to client X, and then a Y, which is our client Y. There's a lot of different ways we could do this. We could also like rename these when we destructure. We could assign them to X equals E dot client X or whatever. But this is just the easiest way to do it. So let's save that. And then, okay. So what we can see here really fast, when we go to components, we have the app here, and we can see our state, and we can see that we actually did a dot, but it's not showing up on the DOM. Why is it not showing up on the DOM? 2 reasons. Number 1, we haven't drawn them out onto the DOM. And then number 2 is that we're going to have to style them so that they're visible. So the first thing we want to do is we're just going to get dots.map. And then what we're going to get from these is we're going to get an X and a Y. and TypeScript's going to yell at me for that. And I'm also going to want the index. So how do you fix this in TypeScript? Well, we have our dots here, X and a Y. And so we can type this, 2 dots. And then we have our index, and I'm going to type that to number. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw this out. And here, I'm just going to draw like a div. And I'm going to give it a class name of, well, I'm going to make it dynamic. No. I'll give it just a class name of dot, let's say. What I want to make dynamic is I want the key. So we're going to have this key here, and I'm just going to call it dot dash, and then I'm going to use the index just to define it, because the dots displayed on the screen will always have a unique index, so I don't really have to worry about this. There are times where like you might want to use like a unique identifier that's a little bit more specific, and we always can. We could do dot and then X and Y, and chances are those will be unique, but this is good. And then so we have this class name of dot, so we need to like style what this dot is gonna look like, but we also need this X and Y. So we kind of have 2 styling patterns. Number 1, rather than using the class name, we can pass inline styles. And just so to do that, you just do the style property and then pass in an array. And so I'm gonna do that for part of it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set left to X, and I'm gonna set top to Y. But I also need to add a little bit more styling to this, because the X and the Y, it's going to be relatively positioned by default, and so it's not going to display exactly where I need. So I'm going to hop into the styling here, and I'm going to do dot, and then I'm going to set it to position of absolute. We also, if you remember from the specs, it's a 10 by 10 pixel. So I'm going to want to define a width of 10 pixels and a height of 10 pixels. And then I want to be able to see it. And so you could do anything from like a background color of aqua, let's say, but then also you want to do a border. And I'm going to do it as 1 pixel solid. Once again, totally fine, whatever you do. I'll do gold. And then border radius, we're going to want to set that to 50%. I'm just going to make it a circle because it makes a lot more sense. So I'm going to save this. And as you see, those 2 dots that we had already drawn appear up on our screen. I'm just going to refresh just to start again, just to see. So I click, and we see our first state object created there. If I expand down, it's 193 by 102. And I'm going to click again and pay really close attention to the click here. When I click, you're going to see that the dot kind of appears a little bit over. And the reason for that is actually not a flaw in the coordinates that we're getting from the client X and client Y. It actually has to do with the CSS. And the reason for that is that when I click, it's drawing a div. But what's going to happen is the mouse pointer is at the 0, 0 position of the div. Now, if we look over here, we know that it has a width of 10 and a height of 10 as well. So I'm just at 0, 0 coordinate of it. And I need to be at 5, 5 to draw this dot exactly where I want to do. So how do you do that? Well, there's a transform property on CSS, and then actually you do what's called a translation. So translate, and then I'm going to do minus 50%, minus 50%. Anyone who's ever had that problem of like, how do I center a div on a page like without using Flexbox or FlexGrid or any of this other stuff, you do it this way. So let's see now when I click. So now that I've done the translation of 50-50, let's see how it looks. So if I click, now it's right in the center. So click right in the center. So that's exactly what we wanted. So now that we're drawing the dots, everything's looking good. The problem is these guys do absolutely nothing right now. So now that we've kind of got there, there's a few different ways that you can kind of handle this. one of the best things to do is you want to commit when you get things working in a way. So I'm going to go git status, and I'm going to have all this stuff. And I'm going to go git commit, and it's kind of cut off here. But I'm just going to commit, I'm just going to call it like dots. And so I just did a quick commit. It's a good thing to do no matter what level you're at as a developer, just to like regularly commit. And I'll post this repo down in the description when I'm done. But when you have functionality working in a certain point, it's good to take a break, just commit. So then if we ever mess around and break everything, we can always revert back to this point. Just dev tip right there, really important. Okay, so anyways, so now we have the draw, amazing. So I'm gonna go const, we have to do two functions. We have to do an undo function. And we're also gonna wanna do a redo function. And so this is kind of interesting problems here, because when you think about it, let's just take a second and just think, I'm gonna undo and it's gonna undraw this dot, and then undo and it's undraw this dot, and undo, it's gonna undraw this dot. And so we need to store those dots, because when we click redo, it's going to draw this dot, then this dot, then this dot, right? So we need to have some sort of like storage for our dots. And so I'm going to create a second state object here called cache. And set cache is the setter function. And so it's going to be a use state. It's going to have the same type of an array of dots. It's just going to be essentially a clone of our current dot state. But it's going to be a storage for our undone dots, and then used to redraw the dots. So in our undo function here, we're going to want to populate the cache with the last dot in our dot state. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call this new dots constant here, and I'm actually just going to spread in the current dots. The reason for that is that we're going to modify this state, and I don't want it to affect our current state. I know it's not going to, but just making a clone of it is also going to allow us to push it back in. So const new dots is just going to be a clone of the old dots, but into a new array. And then I'm going to go const last dot, and then I'm going to go new dots dot pop. And so the pop function removes the last element of the array and returns it to the variable, and then modifies the array without it. So now the new dots array has all the dots except for the last dot, and then this last dot is just going to be the last dot. Now you're probably thinking, can I call pop if the array doesn't exist? And that's a really good question. Not that it doesn't exist, but you know, we know that the default state is it's going to have nothing. So what happens if we hadn't clicked the dot yet? We just click undo. So we want to do a quick check. So we want to go if dots dot length is greater than 0. You can write that a few different ways, but I think this is the most readable. And then, so now that we have checked those dots in the dot array, we've cloned the dot array, we've popped off the last element of the dot array, and then we have the last element cached in this last dot variable here. Then now what we want to do is we want to update our states. So first thing is we want to go set cache. And so what we're going to want to do is we want to pass in the cache that is already existing, because there might be a dot in the cache already. If there's no dot in the cache, it's okay. It's okay to still spread it in. It's just going to spread in an empty array, and it won't affect anything. And then we're going to want to put the last dot as well. The second thing we want to do is, now that we have like this new updated cache. Oh, and TypeScript's yelling at me here because this could be undefined. Even though we're doing a clear check here, that it's good, it still freaks out. So if it does, we can just cast it. You can use the as keyword just to cast it as a dot, and then it'll just stop freaking out. And then so here, we can also go set dots, because we also have to update that. And I could do a new array, but actually I have already a cloned array of it, so I can just pass in new dots, and we've already popped off the last object here. Now you're probably thinking, we have 2 state updates. Why don't we just wrap them in a promise.all? So that means that they'll run together, which is it's a little bit cleaner. Not absolutely necessary, but like when you're making multiple API fetches or you're doing state updates, whatever, putting in a promise.all just keeps it a lot cleaner, makes them run simultaneously. Just a good practice to do. And then here in the redo as well, we're going to do a very similar kind of structure, but we're going to do it a little bit differently. So the first thing is that a redo requires that the cache has some dots in them, right? So we're going to do a quick check if cache.length is greater than 0. Then we're going to do the same thing. So first thing, we're going to go const and we'll make a new cache. And we're just going to spread it in our cache here. And then we're going to go const last cache item. And then we're going to go new cache. And then we're going to do the same thing because as you see when we set our cache, we're putting the last dot at the end of the cache. And so we just want to just pop that off as well. So just as we did here, we'll go pop. And then once again, just to stop TypeScript from yelling at us, I'm just going to cast it as dots. All this does is it just tells TypeScript it's not going to be undefined. Like it's going to be there. It's going to be this object. We're going to have the dot object there, and that's what that variable is going to be. And then we're going to do exactly what we did here. So we're going to set the cache. And so what are we going to set the cache to? New cache, right? Because we've already cloned it and we've popped off the last item. And then we're going to set dots. And so we're going to spread in the existing dots because we want to make sure that those are all there. And then we're going to pass in this last cache item, which is going to be the dot that we popped out of the cache, and now we're putting it back into the dot state. Confusing, I know, but not really. Like, I mean, if you think about it, like it's like in the undo, we're popping a dot out of the dot state, and then we're putting it into the cache state. And then in the cache, we're popping a dot out of the cache, and then we're putting it into the dot state. So just they're essentially reverse of each other. And that's exactly what undo redo is. And then we'll just there. So now we have this undo and redo function, and let's test it out. Let's see if we have things working there. So this is the undo and the redo. Redo, cool. So there we go. Let me just hide the styling and we can just run through the code one last time. I'm confident it's gonna work, but there's always a chance it doesn't. So actually, wait, let me just test it first before I pat myself on the back. Okay, we have a dot. Excellent. Let's click on the app item and see. We can see the state here. I'll just pull this up so it's a little bit clear. So we have two states, right? And we see the one is the dot state and one is the cache state. So we'll see that when we draw a dot, it pops up there. There's a second dot. Excellent. Let's go undo, and then the one should pop out and pop into the cache state. So undo pops out. Excellent. And there's the cache state has been populated now. Undo again. The top state should be empty and the cache state should have 2. Excellent. And then redo, we should see these pop back into the normal state and redraw on the screen. Excellent. Undo, undo, redo, redo. Great. Draw another dot. Undo, 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 redo, redo, redo. Ooh, so wait, something. Okay, no, that's right. Okay, sorry. I was just thinking like, so if I undo, redo, undo, undo, redo, redo. Okay, yeah, no, it's working fine. Excellent. So let's just explain really fast one more time, just how we did it and then some potential optimizations that we could work on. So first of all, we have the interface of dots, and I would probably call this dot because it's just a single dot. I don't know if anyone else was watching this and being like, why do you call it dots? It's like an array of dots. It could just be a dot. That's totally fine. Here we have use state. The two state objects are fine. Some people will argue that, oh my goodness, it's 2 states, so it's redrawing more times. Let me just show you that React is actually really good at reconciliation and making sure that state redraws don't happen more than is necessary. So we have if we refresh, when I draw a dot, it's just a single redraw. When I draw another dot, it's just one more redraw. If I do an undo, it'll go to 3. And I do an undo again, it'll go to 4. If I do a redo, it goes to 5. Redo again, it's 6. So it's just doing a single draw each time. So that's not a problem. Yes, you could use a use reducer. Do I feel like it's overkill to use reducer in this particular case? Yeah, I would say it's a little too early. I think once you start getting like 4 or more state objects that you're managing, you could start working on getting a use reducer. There's no really hard and fast rule there. It's just like, this is just a lot easier to maintain. But yeah, that's a possibility. Could you do this all in one state object? I would not really want developers to do it in one state object. It's harder to debug. I feel like you are introducing a lot more opportunity for bugs to happen if that was the case. Because you could do like an object where it's like, one state object, and it has like a key of cache, which is its own array, and then like dots, which is another array, and you're just like updating them both. But I just don't think, especially because like the draw function like only cares about the dots. It's not modifying cache and stuff like that. It's better to break it into 2 state objects. And like I would challenge you on that in an interview. So that's just something to know. Like, I mean, keep separation of concerns, keep it clean. In our draw function here, we have the client X and client Y with the E. This is pretty straightforward. The mouse event, you probably, maybe when I did that at the start of the video, you were like, the hell's a mouse event? How does he know a mouse event? It's just from practice. You just deal with React enough, do some Googling and that kind of stuff, and then it just sticks in your brain. It's not intuitive. If you, in an interview, made this like a E of like any or something like that, or you just found, like, I don't even know, like if you did like any other typing, I really wouldn't dock that against you. TypeScript just in general is like, it's familiarity for some things, and so yeah, that's totally okay. So this function's fine. The undo function, if you didn't have the if check, that might be something that you just like, as a junior or intermediate dev, that might not be the first thing you would think of. But I would kind of like challenge you, like you could break the app. And so I would probably low key ask you, hey, can you like press undo and redo and just see what happens? And then, that would kind of fluster you a little bit. But yeah, it's just, that's kind of like an important part of this, is that like we're not disabling these buttons. And so I want you to be able to click them at any point, whether you have dots or not. I want you to be able to click them. And so that's something I would look for, is like, do you know to do the catching or something like that, right? And then it's also like a great opportunity because like, some devs would feel like outside of the if, they have to, set dots or do something really weird that is totally unnecessary. And, just maybe like reset it to dots or something, or something silly. And then, so it's a great opportunity to kind of like challenge you there, see it break, and then see how you kind of handle that. So that's something to be prepared for. And it's okay to be flustered in those moments. It just absolutely happens in coding interviews. Sometimes we're actually trying to get you to do that just to see how you handle under that pressure. And like, to be honest, like, that's the moments where, we want to see you just take a second and think and yeah, do all that stuff. So, spreading new dots into a new array, I think that's absolutely necessary here. So just like make sure you're kind of like familiar with like how state updating happens, because if you get a lot of weird side effects when you just kind of like like if for example, like I would expect like a junior dev to go like dots dot push or something, you know what I mean? And like push like a new value into it, like an X and a Y. I know this isn't code here, but like, and then, go like set, set dots or do something like silly like this. But, when you're at the intermediate level, I want to be able to see that, like, okay, I need to like create a new array. I want to like, how to clone an array is really important, especially in this particular case, because now we're going and we're doing some modifications to it. Here on the last dot, you could do like a slice or a splice or anything, like just to kind of get that dot out of there. It doesn't have to be a pop. I just feel like, in this particular case, it's really easy. We're just removing the last. If it's the last or the first item in an array, it's really easy, pop. If it's the first item, it's a shift. If it's a middle item, then yeah, like we want to see like you showing off your splicing skills or this kind of stuff. Casting it as dots. This is like, once again, like just TypeScript casting. Like around the intermediate level, I'd start expecting this. As a junior, I might not even let you do TypeScript to start off with unless you felt like you were really comfortable with it, just because like it slows down stuff, and like there's a lot of like, I feel like a lot of people just get caught up in these like stupid little things that like TypeScript yells at you for. So yeah, like I wouldn't be super hard on that. And then the promise.all, I feel like when you're doing multiple fetches or API calls or like updating state or this kind of stuff, and like they all should be done synchronously, like wrapping in a promise.all just like kind of like cleans it up a lot. It also like, makes sure that they fire synchronously. And it's just kind of like a good habit. Like I think I might have said that already, but yeah, it's a good habit to have. But if you didn't have it and you just did a set cache and a set dots, it would be very minor. I don't even think I would really care. It's almost like a preference thing, even potentially. Yeah, like it's not super detrimental. Here in the redo, I want to see that your brain works in the way that it's like, okay, this was a dots dot length, and now I'm checking if the cache has length, because like I'm doing reverse, right? So like it's nice to see that your brain kind of like catches those little nuances, and that just comes with practice. Once again, new cache, we're cloning the array, so it's really nice to see. And then the last cache item, I think this is a hard to name variable. It could be like last undid dot or like whatever weird stuff. So like I would have a lot of fun here. I don't care at all about as long as you don't name all of your const like just something really like unthoughtful or like just, even offensive or something stupid like this. Like I really don't care what you name your variables for the most part, just as long as they're like understandable. That's what really matters. So it's like, you can have a lot of fun with that. Like I kind of saw when I was spreading it into the set dots, like I was like, oh, maybe I should call it like last removed dot or something of this, like, last cache item. It's fine, totally fine. I don't care. Once again, the promise.all preference thing really doesn't matter, but I just want to see that you're kind of reversing the methodology. Here we have set dots and we're passing in that new dots. Here we have the set cache and we're passing in the new cache, right? So it's like I want to see that your brain is able to like kind of juggle the concepts of like reversing functionality and undoing and redoing that functionality. In terms of the JSX, doesn't really matter. Like as I was saying kind of before, the button wrapper, it could be anywhere. The reason that the button wrapper exists is like, watch, like if I remove the button wrapper and I put the buttons down into the click area, other than the fact that that's happening, I can draw the dots on top of the buttons. And so I'm losing my click handling. Why? Because like the click is on the click area. So that's why I put the buttons down there. So you would want to ensure that your buttons are put in a place where like I'm not going to be drawing dots on top of them, right? So I think that's really important. In the click area itself, I want to see that you know where to put the click handler, that you're like, putting it in an appropriate place where like it's gonna be clickable. You'd be amazed, like some people like don't realize that it has no width or no height or something, and they're like, why isn't the click working or whatever, right? Also that you name your click function like something a little bit useful. It doesn't have to be draw, it could be like point or like place dot or whatever, but just some sort of like unique naming convention. And then also that you understand that you're passing in an event, right? From the on click. Every on click has an event. So like I can even like in the undo and redo, I can access a mouse event here too. I don't need it, so I didn't use it, but just knowing like what the on click passes as arguments to the function, that's pretty important. And then this dot map, you could do this in a lot of different ways. You didn't need to destructure the dot here. You could have done like dot, and then instead of just drawing JSX, like you would just kind of have this, and then you'd have to draw like a return, and then here you'd const x and y equals dot, like destructure it there and draw it that way. Doesn't really matter. I just find it's like a little bit cleaner when you don't have to put logic into your maps or your conditional renderings. So yeah, I like to keep it just as returning the JSX just like that, and then destructure it in the arguments there. Knowing that the index and that a key exists when you're like mapping an object, I think that's like very important. That's like a junior level thing you should understand. So like if you're not comfortable like rendering out multiple objects and like using keys appropriately, I think that's important. If you had have just made the key literally like I really wouldn't care that much. For this like small example, it's just like the thing is like sometimes you might find yourself, let's say like we wanted to also draw the cached dots but like had them like faded at like 50% or something, then when you just have it's gonna be you're gonna have conflicts. You're gonna have like two keys with the same index. So I like prefixing or some sort of unique identifier that says that's what this is. That's like something I look for. And if I don't see it, I would ask a question about it. Knowing when to use inline styling. So knowing that, we're dynamically doing this. You could do this in a lot of different ways. Like, like styled components will like take a prop of the styling or a lot of other things, but like just somehow knowing like how to dynamically style things is very important. So yeah, like I would definitely look for that. If you had to put, remember that I put the app CSS, I like base styled the dot just because this is like a lot of stuff to put inline. If I saw you put it all inline, I wouldn't get super upset, but yeah, like I would look for, that you're not gonna do that. And then just class name dot. Yeah, just once again, just giving decent class names. So that's pretty much it. That's the video. I just wanted to kind of show you, number one, as an interviewer, what we're looking for when you're doing these coding interviews. Number two, just kind of how to do this really fun programming challenge, which I really liked. And then number three, just kind of breaking down, the logic of it, understanding how to do it with TypeScript, because like I feel like there's not enough people doing TypeScript tutorials at this point, and it's becoming more and more popular. It's becoming more and more expected. So junior level, it's okay. You can be really new at TypeScript. You can use a lot more any's. Intermediate, I'm looking for, you've had some experience with TypeScript. You're getting a little bit better at it. And then senior, I would just like expect you to know what you're doing. But yeah, this is kind of the tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. I'll keep trying to post videos like this as I see them, because I enjoy watching them myself. So yeah, happy to share them with you guys. And yeah, have a good day. Thanks.